Hey there, I'm making a video for people that might need help with these old Isuzu NPRs. I've got a lot of help from people on forums, and I think my solution for a lot of my problems has not been documented before, and I want to try to give back to the community, I suppose. But this is my 1993 Isuzu NPR with a 3.9 liter 4BD2T or T2 diesel inline 4 with a JR403E transmission. It's the automatic 4-speed. Now I bought this truck originally in April of 2024, and it would not go above 55 miles per hour, and it would accelerate really slowly until about the middle area. Now I initially thought, due to my own ignorance, that maybe there was a limiter on the truck, reading in other forums that older vehicles prior to 1995 had a speed limiter for industrial vehicles. But I'd come to learn that that was not the case. I initially thought after that maybe I had bad solenoids, and that's why I wasn't shifting. So I replaced the solenoids in the actual transmission and the valve body. Then I messed up my valve body. And then after finally doing a whole bunch more research and messing around with my transmission control module, I found out that it was actually my TCM that was completely fried. And before I messed up the valve body, it was fried, and to my assumption, I believe it was stuck in third gear. And that's why it would not go above 55 miles per hour and would not, you see here, the 55 is red, if it'll focus, would not go above 55 miles per hour and would accelerate really, really slowly. Now, what I did to solve this problem is I went to the junkyard and I got myself a new valve body. Since I mangled mine up, I was too rushed and didn't pay enough attention to taking out the certain bolts you need to take out the valve body in its entirety. I took out every single bolt, and the entire valve body fell apart, which then messed up its seal, and then I couldn't find a seal for it, so then I just jankily made mine out of some fuel gasket paper, which did not work very well. So I went to the junkyard and I got myself a new valve body, and you can get these out of any of these cab over trucks, either the Chevy Tiltmaster that used the JR403E transmission, the Mitsubishi Fuso, that's actually where I got my valve body, obviously the NPR, I think it's from like 1987 to 1999 they're using these transmissions. And you can also get them out of commercial or private or personal vehicles. So smaller cars also use this valve body. It's not for this transmission, they didn't use them in smaller cars, but Jatco just so happened to use the valve body as a universal part. This is Jatco's only medium duty transmission that they ever produced. This was the only time they did it, and then after this they stopped doing it. So they just so happen to use the same valve body as their light duty transmissions in a lot of their cars. You can go ahead and look that up on the internet yourself and do your own research. I don't have it memorized by heart. But anyway, I got a valve body out of a Fuso. Luckily, my junkyard just so happened to have one from 1995. Plopped it in there, made sure everything was nice, torqued to spec. Make sure you get your manual shift linkage inside the valve body, inside the actual transmission housing connected. Don't forget that, or else it will not shift. It will just stick in like first and second gear, and it'll only go between those gears because of the pressure in the transmission. So make sure you get that linkage connected. And then to circumvent my transmission control module or transmission control unit that was fried, I did an old kind of hot rod trick that I saw another fella do, but he did it with a 4L60E transmission, which is a GM transmission, which is a 4-speed. And after doing some research, a lot of people talk about how the JR403E is kind of like a copy of the 4L60E. So I kind of looked and looked around at the actual transmission when I had the valve body out to see what I could do and see how similar it was, and looking at the different service manuals for both transmissions, and I found that, yeah, they are pretty darn similar. What I did to solve this shifting issue is I put in a manual shift. This is just a ratchet shifter, just like the other fella did. Very smart guy. I do not take credit for this. He's very smart. And I put micro switches for the actual solenoids. And then for my case, you can't connect. This is not just a drop-in kit. Unlike the 4L60E, they do have kits from B&M that just drops right in, connects to the 4L60 nice and easy. So I bought myself a really nice and long shift linkage that can get way back there for me, which is another reason why I can't really just do a manual conversion. And then I just retrofitted what was already on the JR403E shifter. So that metal plate there, that is from the transmission. And then I just drilled a hole into that metal plate, made it fit the size of the kit that came with B&M, and then just adjusted the throw distance, so how much it shifts. They have a YouTube video to make it work with my actual shifting setup, to make sure it went into neutral and drive first and reverse all properly. Right, so that's how I figured out the shifting method of it. Now the issue with the solenoid method is, unlike the 4L60E, the JR403E is not powered, right? So the 4L60E, in his video, he talks about this and how the transmission is just powered. They have a power straight to a fuse box, and then all you have to do to get your switches, your solenoids to work, is just to ground them. So he just had made himself a wiring harness from the transmission for all the solenoids, and then had them grounded up in his cab, right? In my case, with the JR403E, it is the opposite. It is not powered, and it is intrinsically grounded. So what you have to do, if you're going to do like me for my conversion, is go through your fuse box. And this truck, at least mine, most of my fuses are running 24 volts or around there, because it's a 2 battery setup system. There's not much conversions happening over here in my fuse box. All I did is I went through here with my multimeter, tested each one, found one that runs at 12 volts. The solenoids themselves in this car are running at 12 volts, as per the transmission control unit. And I was very afraid when I first started messing with it that if I did 12 volts instead of 9, because I saw a bunch of other places saying just do 9 or else will fry the solenoids, that it would mess with the solenoids. But after testing the voltage from the TCM, when I could get it to just fire off, it would be just about 12 volts. So I just have it connected here. I have no idea what fuse that's going to. I forget. It's probably like windshield wipers or something. I don't know. And then I have just a fusible link, or not fusible link, but a fuse like duplicator. So I have one for the original purpose of this fuse, and then I have my secondary fuse, which I just use a 5 amp fuse. Then the actual power that goes all the way over to my shifter. And I made sure to pull the fuse for the TCU. Just don't want that thing on, messing around with my transmission or my engine, which I don't think it will, because I did unplug everything that connects to it. And that is how I got to this whole setup. So now you have power to your transmission, you have the shifting to your transmission. Now what are you gonna do about your solenoids is my next problem that I went through. Let me just climb on in here, make it wider. Now this is the setup I have in here. Sorry, it's disgusting. I was driving along and didn't realize my old reservoir tank that holds my coolant cracked underneath it when I was driving it, probably a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. And it overheated my entire engine, and actually blew up my heater core. You can see the crack there. Not a pleasant experience. Boiling hot coolant doesn't feel very good on the skin. But I fixed that, but that's another story for another time. Now for this manual shifting transmission now, right? Manual shifting, as we can say. You have to have the solenoids open and close as per the service manual, as per how it's supposed to work with this transmission. Now, in the case of the JR403E, what I did is I have 2 micro switches here. I just bolted on to here, just like the other fella did with the JR, with the 4L60E. And for first gear, you have solenoid A and B open. And I just have these micro switches just bent just perfectly right to where I can push them up and open. So they're both clicked on. So the first gear is just solenoid A and B put into first, right? Easy peasy, not that bad. Second gear, now you have second shifter, and you just have solenoid, I believe this is just solenoid B. Yeah, just solenoid B. A is off, right? So if you were driving along in second gear and you push in A, it will go into first gear. Because it's definitely solenoid dependent. You can be in drive and you can push both these things on, it'll go into first gear. Which is kind of the danger of, I guess, doing this sort of modification. But, buy a cheap truck, you got cheap solutions, I guess. Next thing to do is drive, which would be third gear. It is quite an easy solution. No solenoids are open for drive. So you go for second, which just has B, then drive is open for no solenoids. Now, the moment you need fourth gear, which is overdrive, so if you want to go above 55, which is my initial problem with this truck, all you need to do is set it up to have solenoid A come back on again, okay? So what I did is I just have individual switches over here. There are 5 solenoids in this truck. There is A, B, line, overdrive, so line pressure, overdrive, and then there's an additional line, I think like line lock or something like that. I don't remember. I don't even have that one connected right now. Just barely got this thing running a while ago, maybe a month ago. I've been using it now, so I haven't messed around too much with things. In the case of fourth drive, as you see here, I just have a fourth switch, even though it's kind of faded. It is just an on-off switch with just solenoid A on it. So you're in drive, you get to about 35 miles per hour, you hear your engine start getting kind of loud, obnoxious, especially if you're putting around town, you want some good gas mileage. You flick on fourth, turn on solenoid A, and it'll bump it up to overdrive or fourth gear. Now, as for these other 2 solenoids, I leave the line pressure on all the time. In the actual service manual, it says that it pulses intermittently depending on what the transmission needs for pressure. The other fella in that other video said he didn't even have his line pressure on while driving. He just left it unplugged, unpowered. I have these switches here just in case I need them. I don't know. I haven't spent the time to mess around with them if I need them or not, at least for line. Now with overdrive, you have to have it on to be able to go into fourth. I found that if I just leave overdrive and line pressure on all the time, I have no problems. So once I want to go into fourth, I just flick on fourth and bam, we're in fourth. Don't even have to do anything else. Now the caveat of this system, at least my design of it, I'm pretty sure other people could definitely find something a bit more safer, less blow up your transmission-y, is let's say you're driving along in fourth gear here, you have solenoid A on, you have it in drive. Now you're driving along and you're on the highway, you're getting off the highway, going down the ramp, wherever you live, whatever may be happening, and you want to downshift into second gear, right? That was your mistake, first mistake. If you lay off your brake and your clutch engages into second gear, right? Not real second gear, you're actually going to be in first, at least for how I set it up. Because if you remember, if you have fourth on, you're coming off the freeway, that's solenoid A. Second gear is exclusively solenoid B with second gear. Now, if you remember, for the first gear, that's solenoid A and B. So you'll be going from fourth gear to first gear on the ramp if you start giving it gas. Now, if you're just going down the ramp and you're holding on to your brake, what I've realized is that if you're braking, the clutch just engages and you can kind of just coast. I don't know how that works. I have not bothered looking into it enough. All I know is that no matter what I'm doing, if I'm slowing down, just as a safety precaution to not explode my transmission from going from fourth gear going 70 miles an hour down to first gear going 70 miles an hour, what I do when I slow down is instead of putting it into second, I just put it in neutral and you just coast. A lot safer. Put it in neutral, build the habit, turn it off and forth. And then once you stop at that light, or you slow down, or if you need to speed up a bit more, you can go back to third or second, right? No need to blow up your transmission. Easy peasy. And that is the solution for this truck. As for the actual wiring itself, this is just my power cord that goes to my fuse box. That's powered, and then I have that just splits off to my 5 individual solenoids that powers each and every single one of these. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Although the 4th and my A button for the solenoid, those are both just A. I just have those kind of jerry-rigged together. It's just kind of like a T, and it works fine. And there you go. That's my solution for fixing a bad transmission control module for these trucks. You can't buy, at least to my knowledge, I've looked a whole bunch. I have yet to find anybody that has a plug-and-play solution for a automated TCU that's aftermarket for these transmissions. You can't convert one from a 4L60E or a 4L80. I looked into that too. And buying a used transmission control module for these trucks is very expensive, and they all don't promise that it'll work. So you're kind of out of luck if you buy it for just about $1,000 for a computer that's just fried anyway, just like mine. So this is the, I guess, a cheapo solution. If you want to save money, in retrospect of doing this, what I could have done to save money is, instead of buying this shifter, I think I would have just kept the shifter that was in this truck from factory. And there is a tree from factory. I would have just made it a bit easier to shift through it. Of course, there's more risk because this shifter is nice in the fact that it locks out for reverse. I can't go into reverse unless I pull this lever here, so that's a bit of a safety. So if I'm driving along, like I was talking about, slowing down on the highway, if I go from 4th gear into neutral, and then let's say I'm a bit too hasty or somebody cuts me off and I freak out, I can't accidentally go into reverse, right? So I can't blow up my transmission that way. So that's nice. That's the nice thing about this B&M shifter, but it is pretty expensive for this shifter and then the actual shift line that I put down and through the cab and ran through it. But you could save some money by just keeping the original shifter, grinding out some of the patterns so that it shifts a bit easier, smoother. It's not just clunky, and then keep the original shift line. They'll save you probably like $400 right there. And then you just cut up your wiring harness, look at the service manual, see what goes where for the solenoids. Make yourself a longer wiring harness to get it all the way into the cab, run it through the under half of the truck, and then you'd be good to go. But yep, if you guys have any questions, let me know. Depending on how old this video is, I'll actually reply to you or not. There's a lot of information out there, especially on the 4BD 2T. It's mostly just I think it's 4BD forum, where people use the engines out of these trucks and other vehicles to swap out into their vehicles. That's where I got a lot of my information from, and a lot of my service manuals and assistance for asking questions and solving a lot of my problems, just by putting around, reading different people's comments and the problems they're going through. They have a specific subsection of this forum that's specifically for these NPRs. So check out their forum, and then just putting around the rest of the internet for these service manuals. I'm fairly confident you can find most of these service manuals for free. I ended up paying for mine because I was just in a rush and impatient. But I'm pretty sure a lot of people just have it floating around in certain docs, Google Docs, and other places where you can just find it. But yep, if you have any questions, do let me know. Maybe I can help you. I'm not a mechanic. I just figured this out on my own. But yep, best of luck to you and your crappy old flatbed NPRs.